hypothetically speaking, that they are able to somehow establish a beachhead or capture a port and defend it somehow from artillery fire, which, now we're in fantasy land, but we'll just assume that that's the case. They would still be fighting a fight through urban areas, through cities, which is extremely difficult. Mm-hmm. And if they're not in the cities, they would be fighting a fight in mountainous jungles. That's where a lot of the military bases are, and that is even harder. So they just have the hardest terrain challenge as an attacker. So Taiwan is really set up as a defender's dream. It's just almost perfect.
It was perfect. Perfect. Everything, down to the last minute details.
Hi everyone, this is Stan, your favorite Polish Taiwan YouTuber. Hope you're all having a great day. Welcome to today's show. Today I have a guest, Uncle Topher, who is also a fellow YouTuber and who lives in Taiwan right now. And what is important, Uncle Topher used to be in the U.S. military. So, Topher, could you...
Yeah, I was in the U.S. Army for about 8 years, and in that time I was in the invasion of Iraq, so I have a little bit of experience with actually invading the place and being in combat. Did a couple of tours in Iraq. But now I live in Kaohsiung. Yeah. Even though my background is Taipei, I'm living in Kaohsiung. Yeah, J.D. Vance, the Trump nominee for vice president. Yeah. Although I think he was a Marine journalist, and I was a combat engineer, so I was on the front lines, and he was writing about stuff that we would do.
You were actually on the front line, so yeah, that's very...
Yeah, especially in the invasion in 2003. And I was there in the early part of the Iraq War. It was a long conflict. But yeah, now I live in Kaohsiung, and just recently I've been able to find some success with YouTube and went from teaching English to being a full-time YouTuber.
Yeah, that's great. And I think it's also very important for more military people actually talking about Taiwan. And I really do appreciate your channel. You have very interesting insights, and I really do learn a lot every time I watch it when you're talking about like what kind of vessels does Taiwan have, what kind of vessels does China have, what are the US capacities. Like, that's very interesting.
Yeah,
I really do recommend it.
It's a very delicate subject. So a lot of foreign YouTubers, especially, they're not willing to talk about it. Even if they might have some strong opinions about geopolitics or the military, it's okay. I understand.
Well, but that's very complicated, and not everyone has the relevant background to talk about the military, right? So that's very good that there are guys like you. And that's why I'm going to use the opportunity and talk to you about some military stuff, and which is also geopolitics related. So, as a former U.S. military, from the U.S. strategy, global strategy point of view, what do you think are the core interests of the United States in Taiwan? Let me elaborate, because in Taiwan, people talk about commitments of the United States, right? But besides that, there is also probably a selfish side to that, probably because there is something very important in Taiwan for the United States. And what are the things? Could you just let us know?
I would say that most of the U.S. interest in Taiwan is selfish, but that's just the nature of empires. So, don't take
everyone is selfish.
Yeah,
Taiwan is also selfish.
That's how countries work. So, without diving too much into the history of everything, because there is a little bit of ideological interest there with Taiwan being a democracy, and that the U.S. was allies with the Republic of China in World War II. And there is actually a U.S. law where if there is a conflict with Taiwan, then the U.S. will support
Taiwan Relations Act.
Yes, that's right. Well, that's real interesting, because that kind of wording is important. As far as sometimes it's intentionally ambiguous, I should say. But in that case, it's not. All right, good. But for actual boots on the ground interest, the real interest, Taiwan is a very strategic location. It always has been. It's called the heart of Asia for a reason. So whoever controls Taiwan can easily in striking distance of other major countries all throughout Asia and Southeast Asia. Additionally, there's a lot of the world's shipping that goes right through the Strait of Taiwan. and whoever controls Taiwan can influence that shipping as well if they wanted to. So there's that core geographic strategic level interest there. But there's also some economic interest because Taiwan, of course, they make some of the world's best computer chips, and the U.S., is a huge customer of that. Not only that, there's a lot of high precision manufacturing that happens in Taiwan. So the way that I understand it, there's basically only a couple of places in the world where you can find really high precision manufacturing. The U.S., Germany, Japan, Taiwan, maybe a little bit in South Korea too.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of important things that if you need it made just right, it's made in Taiwan. So there's that level of interest as well. And Taiwan is a big customer of the USA. Taiwan buys a lot of U.S. food, a lot of U.S. Weapons.
Plus, Taiwanese investments in the United States, like the TSMC factory in Arizona, and there are some semiconductor manufacturing facilities are going to be opened in Texas, as far as I remember. So it's mutual. The U.S. is invested in Taiwan. Taiwan is invested in the U.S. And so, it seems like Taiwan is very important, not only militarily speaking, but also economically and ideologically, being a democracy. But this doesn't stop China from threatening Taiwan. And everyone is saying how big their military is, how big is the population. And but what is very important, during one of your videos, you said that if China tries to attack, it would be a disaster for them. Could you explain why?
Yeah, I think I made a video specifically where if China tried to invade, it would be a complete disaster, an embarrassing disaster. And geography plays a big part of that. Taiwan's an island. But even as an island, there's only so many beaches that where what's called a landing ship can land on. Most of the beaches are rocky or they're just cliff faces. So you can't have a specifically designed ship to land on and unload the troops. There is concern that China has retrofitted some giant ferries called ro-ro ferries, roll-on, roll-off ferries, ro-ro, to unload while they're at sea. I think that's absurd. It's just a giant target. You're going to open up your door in the middle of the Strait of Taiwan or the ocean. That's just dumb. But even if they were able to have some of these giant ferries to try and capture a port, Taiwan can easily destroy their own port. There's plenty of artillery systems that can reach out and touch any spot in Taiwan. So it's just not feasible for them to effectively establish a beachhead or a port to unload the number of soldiers that they would need to actually control the island. And just hypothetically speaking, that they are able to somehow establish a beachhead or capture a port and defend it somehow from artillery fire, which, now we're in fantasy land, but we'll just assume that that's the case. They would still be fighting a fight through urban areas, through cities, which is extremely difficult. And if they're not in the cities, they would be fighting a fight in mountainous jungles. That's where a lot of the military bases are. And that is even harder. So they just have the hardest terrain challenge as an attacker. So Taiwan is really set up as a defender's dream. It's just almost perfect.
It was perfect. Perfect.
And plus there is also Taiwanese allies that are saying that will come and help Taiwan.
That's not even mentioning the obvious response that would happen from Japan and the Philippines and the US. Now, that's an invasion. Now, there's a lot of ways that China could just attack Taiwan or instigate a conflict, right? They could do something like set up a quarantine around one of the islands that are actually much closer to China,
like a blockade.
Yeah, which is a blockade, but they would use the words quarantine because blockade is an act of war. So, but quarantine is the same thing. It just is a different word, right? They would claim it. This is our own place. We're going to quarantine it off. And there's not that would still have a reaction. It would probably still cost the Chinese more than what they would gain, but it would cost them in the terms of economic sanctions. That would happen. Okay. Are those islands are much more strategically important to Taiwan as like an early warning system than they are to the U.S. So I don't think the U.S. would necessarily get militarily involved in an attack like that, but an actual invasion of Taiwan or a blockade of Taiwan, absolutely, the U.S. would get involved.
But for Taiwan, I think, like for the United States, for Taiwan, it would also be a signal, because China won't be satisfied with only capturing those islands off the coast of China, Kinmen and Matsu, like those islands, and which is interested from the point of view of international law. Those islands are not covered by the Taiwan Relations Act. Only Taiwan and the Passadores.
Right.
So the U.S., it would be, legally speaking, it would be hard for the U.S. to actually be involved in direct conflict with China. Maybe there will be something like was there during the crisis in Taiwan Strait, when those islands have been bombed and the U.S. helped with providing weaponry.
It would get really, really murky, because there are U.S. Special Forces stationed in Jimen. We know this. This is public knowledge now. And there's most likely also U.S. Special Forces stationed in Matsu as well. So if something did happen to one of those islands and U.S. personnel were killed or captured or something like that, it would definitely sour the relationship with the U.S.
Yeah.
Would it incite a military response? Maybe. I mean, that all depends on who's the president and what exactly happens. But regardless, any sort of aggression that China would have against Taiwan or any Republic of China territories would be met with at least some sort of a sanction. And because China is one of the world's largest exporters, probably the world's largest exporter, they rely very heavily on other countries for their economy. And anything that messes with that can really cause a lot of pain for the Chinese people, unfortunately, for them. Yeah, I don't think the CCP cares a lot about the well-being of most average Chinese people, though. So.
But they might care if there would be like protests during those like white paper protests, when they had to roll down their zero COVID policies after that, because people were like too mad and just took on the streets, which is very uncommon for.
Yeah. At the moment, China's economy is not doing fantastic. It's not great. They have that whole housing bubble crisis, which I don't really see a solution.
Overcapacity and high unemployment rates within Chinese youth, which is also like very dangerous. It's a very societally and demographically speaking, China is basically a ticking bomb. So
yes, exactly. Yeah, and I'm sure you know, but a lot of the export market has already left China. A lot of people have moved their business to other countries: Indonesia, Vietnam, Mexico, Colombia. So people are starting to wean themselves off of the Chinese markets, which is making life harder. And anything that China does to accelerate that process would be pretty foolish.
Well, basically, they're doing everything to accelerate that, because many of the Western companies, why are they leaving? Like the due diligence auditors, why they have been leaving? Basically, because there was that anti-espionage law in China, under which many of the Western due diligence companies were actually people were put into jail. And if you cannot do the due diligence investigation, how can you conduct your business in China?
Well, years of zero COVID, the due diligence, anti-espionage laws, it's very business unfriendly.
Yeah.
And the cost of labor is not super cheap in China. It's not like it was in 2020.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, in the year 2000. It's not like it was 20 years ago. The cost of labor is not as cheap as it was. So it just financially it makes more sense to move your business to Vietnam or Indonesia, where there's just as many available engineers
or India.
Other people with STEM degrees. Yeah, exactly. So
I mean, like, why everyone is not talking about India? I think it's a very very good potential development market, and they have very young population, huge population, bigger than China's population. Also, people with very high education, people who speak English. English is one of the official languages in India, so it might be easier and more investment friendly for people to invest in that country. I'm not affiliated with India, just looking at raw data, it seems like a very, very good market to invest into.
I think a lot of the big name companies that are still doing business within China are doing it because they have an interest in accessing the Chinese market,
which is also big. But with current economic crisis, I think it would lose its appeal to the foreign investors, because basically people cannot afford the things that you produce there. Then what is the reason of investing in that country? You said
not
that
as much 10 years ago. Yeah, I agree.
10 years ago it was, everyone was talking about China and how well is it developing, but I think under Xi Jinping leadership we won't see any changes, and it seems that the guy is gonna rule for life. What I wanted to ask you, just make a smooth transition to the next question, is that you said that it depends who is the US president at the time, like if something happens in Kinmen or Matsu. Right now, a lot of changes are happening within the US politics. Joe Biden is not running for the president anymore. From the Democrats, it's Kamala Harris. We don't know who VP would be, but there are some predictions, and people are trying to guess. Maybe it would be like the Secretary of Transport or Governor of California. I don't know. We don't know yet. But we have Trump with the Republicans and Trump's new administration that might be a little bit different from the first one. And we're having Kamala Harris and the Democrats. What do you think if the changes within the US administration, no matter who is elected, who becomes the president, would affect the US-Taiwan relationships, and how?
Well, Taiwan and China is one of those things where in the US it's actually a bipartisan issue. A lot of the Republicans and the Democrats, they actually sometimes they see like who can be harder on China more, like who can be tougher on China. So we know that Trump introduced a lot of tariffs and gave Taiwan, or he sold a lot of weapon systems to Taiwan, a lot of them that previously they didn't really want to sell for a couple of different reasons. And then Biden came in and also gave a lot of aid to Taiwan, and then like doubled down on those tariffs, put down even more tariffs, stricter even computer chip tariffs and sanctions. So if Trump comes in, I imagine he will stay the similar course as he was in his first term. Now, he has had some rhetoric. He said some things that are have made the Taiwanese nervous. It caused the stock market to drop a little bit. But Donald Trump just says a lot of stuff. You can't take everything that he says super seriously.
Basically said is that Taiwan has to pay for its defense, but Taiwan is doing that already. And if it means that he would be offering more weapons, that's a good signal, actually.
It is. Well, he also said that Taiwan stole the chip industry from the U.S., which is not true. Which is not true. He misunderstands the history of that. And it basically was a common project between the United States and Taiwanese companies to compete with Japanese semiconductor sector at that time. So that's why Americans moved a lot of semiconductor manufacturing to Taiwan, basically not to see Japan becoming the superpower. As far as the super high-end semiconductors, the stuff where it's like super, super small, TSMC took a risk in buying the new manufacturing equipment, which was pretty expensive, to see if they could get it to work. And it did work for them. And, Intel over at the US didn't take that risk. And so they lost their top dog position in the market. So, it's a combination of a partnership as well as risks taken by TSMC, which turned out to be a good thing for them. So as far as that rhetoric is concerned, I don't think there's going to be much change, especially if Kamala Harris wins the presidency. I imagine that she'll probably continue with a lot of the programs that Biden had.
Okay.
Donald Trump, though, he is a little unpredictable. So
Okay.
who knows? I mean, he might soften things up with Taiwan. He might start charging more for weapon systems. He might become super generous to just intimidate China. I don't
he
know.
also said that if China tries to invade, he's going to bomb Beijing. It was also
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, I really have no idea. I might as well close my eyes and throw a dart at a dartboard. I don't know what Trump will do.
Well, maybe it also depends on who are the people within his administration. If there is someone like John Bolton or Mike Pompeo, if they're back, or someone, J.D. Vance is also very, he's very harsh on China, and he said that China is like an existential threat to the United States. So I'm personally, I'm optimistic about both. I think if it's Kamala, it might be similar to what Joe Biden has been doing. But if it's Trump, then we might see some of the policies being back. And what was important during Mike Pompeo's time as Secretary of the State is he lifted the self-imposed restrictions on communications with Taiwan, which also opened up a new opportunities for developing relationships between the two states.
It really did.
So I don't know, but militarily speaking, do you think there will be any changes within the military strategy in Asia Pacific and Indo-Pacific between the Republicans and Democrats?
Well, it's clear that under Biden's administration, the U.S. Navy has been really fortifying their positions where they can around Taiwan. So there've been a lot of buildup in Okinawa and Guam, and now they're establishing a base in the northern of the Philippines. So I imagine that Kamala Harris would continue the course with that, just as is. I think Trump would probably do the same. There's a lot of investment there, and I think the generals would be able to, the generals and the admirals, they'd be able to explain to Trump the need for the importance of this buildup. And so I don't think he would shut things off on that. So I imagine that there might be some programs that would be cut. Some things like they might stop spending as much money on things like new developing stealth bombers or new developing stealth ships in favor of like stealth drones, UAVs and UUVs. They might try and steer their investment into more like AI drone warfare systems and anti-drone warfare systems. So you might see something like that, but I think that could happen under either person's administration.
Well, why do you think drones are so important in modern warfare?
Well, I mean, the Russia-Ukraine has shown exactly how important they are. That you can take a drone with, a drone that's outfitted with a bomb on it, what costs maybe total $2,000, something like that, and it can destroy a tank worth $20 million. You can take basically turn a jet ski into a drone, slap on a bunch of explosives. What does that cost? $20,000 max, and destroy a warship worth $100 million. I mean, it's just the cost-benefit ratio is there. Plus, you can manufacture them so much quicker than you can like the traditional weapon systems that we're used to, tanks and warships and artillery systems and things like that. Plus, drones have been shown to be able to be like snuck in and launched deep into borders. So if they can launch drones in deep within Russia because they sneak the weapon systems in somehow and launch them out, and are striking, I think mostly like oil and infrastructure targets.
But, like refineries.
Yeah, exactly. Deep within Russian borders, the exact same thing can happen anywhere. So drone systems are clearly a good investment. I highly encourage Taiwan also develop its own drone weapon systems too. Don't just rely on the U.S. or anyone else to make drone weapon systems. You guys are smart. It's a great manufacturing, super educated. You have all the motivation to do it. I highly encourage.
And then that basically is the next question, because right now, what are your suggestions as a U.S. military, as a former U.S. military, to Taiwan? If Taiwan wants to protect itself, what should Taiwan do? I think drones, and not only like military-grade drones, but also what I've read about the Ukraine warfare currently is that even the consumer-grade drones, like those DJI minis, like those that are very cheap, they're dirt cheap. They also are very good for intelligence gathering. You can also mount something on those drones, and they're acting. I don't understand anything about military, but per how I see it, it helps you to see the target, and then you can actually launch your artillery more precisely to hit the target. So it increases precision of your artillery attacks.
Exactly. Yeah, that's called the spotter. It used to be a soldier with, maybe they had some binos and a radio, and they could call in to where the target is, call in for the artillery strike. But now you don't even have to put a soldier's life in danger. You can just have a drone flying above. And if the drone gets shot down, oh no, we're out $100. Oh well.
Yeah.
There's another drone right over there. So it's really changed a lot with warfare. And there's a lot of applications to drones that could even use older technology. So, we could have like solar powered balloon drones, like a weather balloon kind of drone, just way up there, flying up in high altitude with a radar system or other sensors, infrared sensors, looking for all sorts of signals coming in. Just another way to defeat any sort of stealth aircraft or other things. So you can have this persistent guard, basically, that, in a country that has a declining population and just not as many soldiers to draw upon. Drones seem like a great idea. You can have one operator, or even if you have an AI system, you can have an AI system operating thousands of different drones. So I think that would be a great investment. But there's also other things that they could invest in, traditional anti-aircraft missiles, anti-ship missiles. The great thing about Taiwan is it really needs to only focus on defense. So there's not really a need to try and buy or develop any sort of like bomber system, something that the stealth bomber or stealth fighters. You just need stuff that can shoot down an attacking aircraft or destroy an incoming ship. So, drone or other like mine lane ships, sea mine lane ships, that kind of stuff. I think those would be a good investment. But apart from that, there are some other steps that Taiwan could take. I think trying to become more energy self-sufficient and food self-sufficient is also a really good idea, because if there is a blockade and it proves to be more of a challenge for Japan and the US to come to Taiwan's aid and break that blockade, Taiwan needs to be able to keep the lights on. Needs to be able to keep feeding its people. So self-sufficiency in those areas are also very important. And even if there's just some sort of other economic issue that happens in the world, like another pandemic or something like that, it's just a good idea. Apart from that, I would also suggest that Taiwan really focuses on what's called soft power, on trying to export their culture, to develop some sort of an interesting culture that can be shown out to the world, the normal people of the world, that is entertaining and fun, and not only like brings tourism to Taiwan, but also a lot of awareness of that Taiwan is more than just this thing you hear about in the news in relation to China all the time.
Yeah, and it's not only like microchips, because probably not many people are gonna stand up and okay, let's fight for the microchips in Taiwan. But if there is like a pop idol or I don't know, like a movie star, like people would be. It's easy to have a connection with like an artist or with a singer than with some microchips that are not alive.
Yeah. Look, 20, 30 years ago, few people in the U.S. could point to where Korea was on a map, right? And it's because of K-pop and some of the cool TV shows that they've been putting out that, you know, now they love it. They love K-pop and K-dramas and all that sort of stuff. So, you know, with Japan was able to do it with like anime and other just sort of the wacky Japanese culture.
With
that's
gaming industry also. Like
Exactly. Stuff like that. So that level of exporting that soft power, that culture. And the U.S. does it too with, you know, their own music industries and sports and Hollywood.
So, I mean, like the first thing that comes to mind, Netflix, like all of those shows that you're watching, like the made in the U.S. Most of them are.
Yeah. So I think if Taiwan puts some real concerted effort in that sense, it makes Taiwan more valuable to just the everyday person. And those people influence the politicians. That has a chain effect. And I think Taiwan really has a foot in the door with its very pro-LGBTQ stance. You know, it being the
first Asian country. And then like recently, like with the RuPaul's Drag Race winner, they met President Tsai when she was still in the office. And
that's right.
It was like first Taiwanese American to win such kind of a competition. That's good. Being the first Asian country to legalize same-sex partnerships, that's amazing.
That's just one aspect of their culture that they can, you know, broadcast out and let the world know, hey, we're more than semiconductors. And you know.
Great. Well, Topher, thank you so much. It was a very interesting conversation, and I learned a lot actually. And so for everyone out there, don't forget to subscribe to Uncle Topher, 美国叔叔. He lives in Kaohsiung, and he's sharing his perspective on Taiwan military, U.S. military, foreign affairs, international relations.
I have a combination of just kind of silly life in Taiwan videos as well as geopolitics. So you can get both. Thanks a lot for having me, Stan. I really appreciate it.
Don't forget to subscribe. See ya.